For 5 long minutes the auction hall buzzed with laughter, chatter, and the sound of paddles slapping against palms. But amid that noise, something far quieter was happening. A small German shepherd sat trembling beneath the harsh white lights. His fur was patchy, one leg bandaged, his ribs faintly visible beneath dull brown fur. His eyes, those deep amber eyes, searched the crowd like he was looking for someone who might still believe he mattered. "Who'd want that one?" a man whispered. "Dog looks half broken," another muttered. The words cut through the air like cold wind. The auctioneer's voice boomed. "Next up, a young male German shepherd, approximately 3 years old, found injured near the edge of Route 14. Starting bid, $50. Silence. No paddles lifted. The dog, Axel, shifted uneasily, limping to stay balanced. The chain around his neck jingled softly, each sound echoing through the hall like a plea for mercy. In the back row sat a man no one noticed. A quiet figure wearing a worn denim jacket and calloused hands that looked like they'd built a lifetime from hard work. His name was Evan Cole, 36, a former paramedic from Montana who had moved to the edge of Wyoming after an accident ended his career. He'd seen enough blood, enough loss to know what silence meant. And right now, silence meant this dog didn't stand a chance. The auctioneer sighed. "No interest? All right, Evan's hand rose slowly. "I'll take him." Every head turned. The murmurs started. "That one? He's injured, man. Waste of money." But Evan didn't care. He saw something in Axel's eyes, a flicker he hadn't seen in months, maybe because he recognized it, the look of someone who'd been left behind. When the gavel struck wood, Axel's fate changed forever. Evan carried the trembling dog to his truck, wrapping him in an old army blanket. The night air was cold, the parking lot nearly empty, and the moon hung low like a watchful guardian. Axel leaned against the seat, breathing shallow, his body stiff with fear. Evan glanced over. "You're safe now, buddy. We'll take it one step at a time." The drive home was quiet. Only the hum of the tires and the occasional whimper from Axel filled the space. Back at his small cabin near the foothills, Evan opened the passenger door and waited. Axel hesitated, sniffed the air, then limped slowly out. Evan knelt, speaking softly. "Come on, pal, you're home." Inside, he laid out blankets by the wood stove and filled a bowl with water. Axel stood uncertain, ears twitching at every creak. He took a few cautious sips, then settled onto the blanket, curling tight as if afraid it would all vanish. For the first time in months, Evan felt purpose again. Days passed quietly. Axel didn't bark, didn't play. He ate only when Evan wasn't looking. Evan tried everything. Fresh food, gentle words, long silences. Healing wasn't about rushing, it was about showing up. One evening, as rain tapped softly against the windows, Evan sat by the fire reading an old paperback. Axel shifted closer, inch by inch, until his head rested against Evan's boot. Evan froze, barely breathing. Then he reached down, scratching behind Axel's ear. The dog's tail thumped once against the floor, hesitant but real. That night, Evan whispered, "You remind me of someone I used to be." Weeks turned into months. Axel's limp improved, his coat grew thick again, and his eyes, once dull and distant, began to shine with life. He followed Evan everywhere, into the woods, down to the river, even to town where the locals began to recognize them. "That's the rescue dog," they'd say. But what no one knew was that Axel carried a secret. Late one night, Evan woke to Axel barking furiously at the door. It was past midnight, the storm outside raging wild, thunder shaking the walls. "Axel, easy, boy!" But Axel wouldn't stop. His body stiffened, hackles raised. He darted to the back window, growling low. Evan grabbed a flashlight and peered out. Nothing, just sheets of rain. He sighed and turned away. That's when Axel lunged, grabbing the hem of Evan's flannel shirt and tugging hard. "What is it, boy?" Axel barked again, more desperate this time. Evan followed him outside into the storm. The dog led him toward the tool shed behind the cabin, its roof sagging from years of weather. The moment Evan stepped near, lightning flashed, revealing smoke curling from the shed's corner. "Fire," he whispered. The electrical line must have shorted in the storm. Flames licked up the wall, dangerously close to the propane tank stacked beside it. Evan dashed inside for the fire extinguisher, coughing through smoke as Axel barked relentlessly. The heat grew intense, the wind feeding the flames. When Evan stumbled backward, dizzy from smoke inhalation, Axel charged in, grabbed his jacket sleeve, and dragged him clear of the doorway just before the shed exploded into fire. The blast knocked them both to the ground. Rain poured over them as embers scattered into the night sky. When Evan opened his eyes, Axel was standing guard over him, soaked but unharmed, whining softly, nose pressed to Evan's cheek. "Good boy," Evan whispered hoarsely. "You saved my life." The next morning, the fire crew arrived. The shed was gone, but the cabin had survived. The sheriff patted Axel's head and said, "Guess he's your guardian now." Evan smiled faintly. "Guess we saved each other." Over time, their story spread across the small town of Clearwater Ridge, Wyoming. Locals came by with dog treats, blankets, even donations to help rebuild the shed. Evan politely declined most, but he shared Axel's story online, not for sympathy, but to remind people what compassion could do. He wrote, "I bought a dog no one wanted. Turns out he's the reason I'm still here." Within days, the post went viral. Thousands of comments poured in from people around the world. "I'm crying. This restored my faith in humanity. I lost my dog last year. Thank you for reminding me to love again." But beyond the likes and shares, something deeper happened. People began adopting rescue dogs that shelters had given up on. They tagged Evan in their stories, saying, "Because of Axel." Evan would sit by the fire every evening reading those messages aloud. Axel would tilt his head as if he understood. Months later, winter arrived early. Snow blanketed the cabin in silence. Evan and Axel took daily walks through the woods, leaving 2 sets of footprints in the white. One morning, they hiked up to the ridge overlooking the frozen lake. The air was sharp and clean, the kind that reminded Evan of why he'd chosen solitude. But that peace was broken by the faint echo of tires screeching far below. A pickup truck had slid off the icy road, crashing near the tree line. Without thinking, Evan sprinted downhill, Axel close behind. The driver, an elderly man, was trapped, smoke rising from the engine. The door was jammed. Evan tried pulling it open, but the handle snapped. He shouted, "Axel, back!" Then he noticed Axel darting around the truck, barking wildly. He squeezed through a broken window, grabbed the man's sleeve with his teeth, and began pulling. The glass cut his muzzle, but he didn't stop until Evan could reach in and drag the man out. Seconds later, the truck burst into flames. When the rescue team arrived, they found the driver safe and a German shepherd lying beside him, panting heavily but alive. The medic said, "If it wasn't for that dog, neither of them would have made it." Evan smiled through tears. He's got a thing for saving lives. That night, as snow fell softly outside, Evan sat beside Axel near the fire. He cleaned the small cuts on Axel's muzzle, whispering, "You don't owe me anything, you know that. But somehow, you keep giving more." Axel rested his head on Evan's lap, eyes heavy but peaceful. "You were never broken," Evan said softly. "You were just waiting for someone to look long enough to see you." As months passed, Axel became a local hero. The sheriff invited them to a town event where kids lined up to pet him. Evan stood on the small stage, microphone trembling in his hand. "When I found Axel, everyone said he was a lost cause. But that night when he dragged me out of a burning shed, I realized something. Sometimes the ones the world rejects are the ones who save it." The crowd clapped. Axel barked once, wagging his tail proudly. But deep inside, Evan knew this story wasn't about rescue or fame, it was about healing. Both of them had carried invisible scars. Evan from years of loss, Axel from abandonment and pain. But together, they'd built something new, trust. He often wondered what Axel's life had been before that auction. One evening, while brushing Axel's fur, he noticed something under the old collar, a faint engraving on a small metal tag. The letters were worn but still legible. It read, "For my best friend, Axel, come home soon." Evan froze. That meant Axel once belonged to someone who loved him. Maybe a soldier. Maybe a kid who never got to find him again. He searched online, posted photos, checked missing pet records, but no matches appeared. In the end, he whispered to Axel, "Maybe you were meant to find me instead." Axel wagged his tail as if agreeing. Spring returned. Wildflowers painted the meadows near the cabin, and the air smelled of rain and pine. Evan built a new shed, stronger this time, and hung Axel's old auction tag on the door, a reminder of where their story began. Every morning, They'd walked down the same dirt road, the one leading past the old auction barn that now stood empty. The building had closed after complaints about mistreatment. Evan stopped once, staring at the peeling sign. "You know, buddy," he said quietly, "that place gave you up, but maybe it gave me back my life." Axel nudged his leg, tail swishing gently. One afternoon, a letter arrived in Evan's mailbox. It was from a woman in Texas named Lydia Hart. She'd seen Axel's viral story and recognized the name on the tag. Her husband, a K-9 officer, had been killed in duty 3 years earlier. Their German shepherd, Axel, had gone missing after the accident. "I thought he was gone forever," the letter read, "but seeing his eyes, I know it's him." Evan's hands trembled. He looked at Axel sleeping by the stove, peaceful and content. He knew what he had to do, even if it hurt. A week later, Evan drove to Texas. When Lydia saw Axel, tears streamed down her face. "It's really you," she whispered, kneeling as Axel nuzzled against her chest. But after a long pause, she looked up at Evan. "He's found a new home, hasn't he?" Evan swallowed hard. "He's your dog. You loved him first." Lydia smiled faintly. "Maybe. But sometimes love means letting go. Axel belongs with you now. You both needed each other." Driving back through the endless plains, Evan glanced at Axel in the passenger seat. The dog rested his head on the window, watching the sunset paint the sky in gold. Evan whispered, "Guess we're both home now." Years later, people in Clearwater Ridge still talked about the man and his dog, the one no one wanted who became a hero. Evan would often walk by the lake at dawn, tossing a stick into the water as Axel bounded after it, muscles strong, coat glistening in the morning sun. Sometimes strangers stopped to ask, "Is that the dog from the story?" Evan would smile. "Yeah, that's Axel." They'd watch in quiet awe as Axel sprinted back, tail wagging, eyes bright with life. When the evenings grew long and quiet, Evan would sit by the fire, hand resting on Axel's back, listening to the crackle of wood. And in those still moments he realized something. It wasn't just about saving a dog. It was about saving each other. So if you ever see someone, human or animal, standing alone, scared or forgotten, remember Axel. Remember what one quiet act of compassion can do. Because sometimes the smallest decision can change 2 lives forever. Before you go, make sure to hit like, share, and subscribe, because stories like Axel's deserve to be heard around the world. And tell me in the comments, where are you watching from?